Imagine a relationship where one partner speaks in colors and the other in echoes. This is the silent reality of the bond between humans and dogs, a connection built on centuries of companionship, but often fractured by a profound lack of communication. We call them our best friends, our family members, and our fur babies, showering them with a brand of affection that feels perfectly natural to us as humans. Yet, beneath the surface of this deep adoration lies a frustrating paradox. The very gestures we use to express our love, the tight embraces, the high-pitched chatter, and the constant physical closeness, are often the exact things that trigger a quiet, simmering stress within our canine companions. This is the friction between humanizing and understanding. When we treat a dog like a small human in a fur coat, we unintentionally ignore the complex biological blueprint that has governed their species for millennia, replacing their actual needs with our own emotional desires. Our journey together began roughly 15 Owazuzaman years ago, a vast stretch of time where dogs performed a miraculous feat of evolutionary gymnastics. They adapted their social structures and even evolved specific facial muscles to better mimic human expressions and catch our attention. They learned to read our pointing fingers and recognize the subtle shifts in our vocal tones better than almost any other animal on Earth. However, while their lifestyle changed from forest hunters to suburban couch sleepers, their primal sensory sensitivities remained largely intact. They are still creatures of the pack and the hunt, wired with ancient instincts that prioritize personal space, scent-based communication, and the absolute freedom of movement. We live in a world of vibrant sights and tactile textures, but the dog lives in a world of invisible chemical trails and micro-expressions that most humans are completely blind to. Because dogs are so incredibly desperate to please us and maintain social harmony, they often endure our affections in what behaviorists call a silent scream. You might see a photograph of a child draped over a golden retriever and think it looks adorable, but a trained ethological eye sees a much darker story. The dog isn't smiling, it is experiencing a freeze response. Its body is rigid, its ears are pinned back tightly against its skull, and its eyes show a crescent of white, a phenomenon known as whale eye. These are the desperate distress signals of an animal that feels trapped but is too loyal to snap or bite. Tragically, statistics suggest that a staggering number of well-intentioned owners misinterpret these clear signs of discomfort as signs of stoic enjoyment. We see a calm, patient dog, while the dog is actually practicing extreme self-restraint in the face of overwhelming sensory anxiety. To truly bridge this communication gap, we must acknowledge their sensory superpowers. A human's primary way of interacting with the environment is through vision and physical touch. We want to see something and then immediately grab or hold it. For a dog, however, the world is built on a complex architecture of scent and subtle body shifts. Their nose is tens of thousands of times more sensitive than ours, and their ability to detect a tensing muscle from across a room far exceeds our own capabilities. This fundamental difference leads us to our first major point of biological conflict: the hugging trap. As humans, we are primates. Our biological hardware dictates that a hug is a universal gesture of protection, warmth, and intimacy. For a dog, however, the experience is diametrically opposed. In the canine world, placing a limb over the back or neck of another individual is a display of social dominance, a challenge, or a precursor to a fight. When you wrap your arms around a dog, you are effectively removing their primary defense mechanism, their ability to run. Dogs are cursorial animals, meaning they are biologically designed to flee from danger as their first instinct. By pinning them in a hug, you trigger an immediate spike in cortisol, the stress hormone. Their brain enters a fight or flight loop, and since they cannot fly, they are forced to endure a perceived predatory threat from the person they trust most. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Paying attention to these subtle warning signs is the first step toward becoming a better guardian. During these moments of unwanted physical contact, look for the flicker of a tongue, a quick lip lick that has nothing to do with hunger. Watch for the stress yawn, a wide, tense gape that happens when the dog isn't tired at all. They might stiffen their posture, turn their head away to avoid eye contact, or lower their tail beneath their belly. These are not random movements. They are a polite, desperate plea for space. By learning to recognize these cues, we move away from a relationship of ownership and toward a partnership of mutual respect, ensuring our love is felt. While we focus on what we can see and feel, the domestic dog exists in a secondary, invisible dimension, the realm of scent. This brings us to a conflict that happens daily in almost every modern household: the olfactory assault. To a human, a clean home smells like bleach, lemon, or synthetic vanilla. We view these smells as symbols of hygiene and comfort. However, to a dog whose sense of smell is up to 100,000 times more acute than ours, these synthetic fragrances are a sensory nightmare. Citrus, ammonia, and vinegar are physically irritating to their sensitive nasal membranes, often causing them to sneeze, rub their faces on the carpet, or even avoid certain rooms. Imagine the overwhelming noise of a megaphone used directly in your ear. That is what a dog experiences when we douse our living spaces in concentrated chemicals. This clean house conflict highlights a deep biological divide. Humans are motivated by a desire to mask natural odors, but for a dog, those natural earthy smells are the foundations of security. Scent marking and scent recognition are how dogs identify friends, map territory, and process their identity. When we scrub away the dog smell and replace it with a mountain breeze spray, we are essentially deleting the dog's social profile and replacing it with white noise. A dog who tries to roll in the grass after a bath isn't being naughty. They are desperately trying to reclaim their lost identity and shield themselves from the chemical fog we have imposed upon them. To coexist, we must realize that what smells fresh to us often feels like a hostile environment to them. Beyond the nose, we often offend the dog's sense of spatial safety through the common head pat. It is a universal human impulse. You see a dog, and your hand moves toward the top of its head. In human dynamics, reaching for the head can be a sign of protection or casual greeting. But in the canine world, a hand descending from above is a looming threat. Because their eyes are positioned differently, a hand moving over their brow enters their blind spot while appearing to block their upward vision. This triggers an ancient survival mechanism. Watch a dog next time someone reaches for their crown. Most will duck, blink rapidly, or lean away. This isn't because they fear the person, but because the gesture is biologically intrusive. It feels like a display of dominance rather than affection. The better alternative, which respects canine personal space, is to approach from below the eye line. Scratching a dog under the chin or on the chest allows them to maintain full visual contact with your hand, removing the element of surprise. This under-the-chin approach signals that you are not trying to exert control. It invites the dog into the interaction rather than forcing it upon them, transforming a potentially stressful encounter into a consensual moment of bonding that prioritizes their comfort over our instinct to reach. This leads to the social hierarchy of sight, specifically prolonged eye contact. There is a beautiful phenomenon known as the oxytocin gaze, where a dog and its owner look deeply into each other's eyes, triggering a mutual release of the love hormone. However, this only happens within a foundation of absolute trust. Outside of that specific bond, a direct, unblinking stare is interpreted as a challenge. In the wild, staring is a precursor to an attack. When a stranger or an overeager owner locks eyes with a dog for too long, the dog's brain shifts into high alert. This is why many dogs look away or flicker their eyes when you stare. They are using a look away as a vital de-escalation signal to tell you they mean no harm. Finally, we must confront the underlying error: the persistent shadow of anthropomorphism. We treat dogs like furry humans because it makes us feel closer to them, but this is a fundamental conceptual mistake. By projecting our social rules, like the idea that staring means paying attention, or that perfumes mean cleanliness, we ignore the ethology of a distinct species. To love a dog truly is to stop seeing them as reflections of ourselves and see them as the sensory-driven companions they are. When we trade our human expectations for canine understanding, we finally begin to speak a language they can truly understand. Beyond the sensory and physical boundaries, we often overlook the psychological weight of instability. To a human, a life without a schedule might seem like ultimate freedom, a chance to escape the mundane. But for the domestic dog, this lack of routine is a persistent architect of stress. Their primal ancestors survived by understanding the predictable rhythms of the natural world and the timing of the hunt or the safety of the den at dusk. When a well-intentioned owner provides food, walks, and rest at entirely random intervals, the dog loses its internal compass. Without a predictable structure, their biological clock and the circadian rhythm that regulates everything from digestion to hormone release is thrown into chaos. A dog who doesn't know when their next meal is coming or when they will be allowed to relieve themselves lives in a state of low-level, constant vigilance. They are always on, watching the owner for clues, unable to truly sink into a restorative sleep. Routine is not a restriction. It is the psychological foundation that allows a dog to relax. This longing for predictability and safety is often shattered in the name of fun during forced socialization. We have collectively bought into the myth of the dog park, the idea that every canine is a social butterfly yearning to romp with 20 strangers. In reality, most dogs are selectively social or even introverted by human definitions. In the wild, meeting a strange canine is a high-stakes event that requires careful posturing and slow introductions. When we thrust them into a fenced enclosure filled with high-arousal energy, we aren't giving them a party. We are giving them a gauntlet. This is exacerbated by the on-leash greeting. When two dogs meet while tethered, they are stripped of their ability to use flight as a de-escalation tactic. Feeling trapped, they often resort to leash reactivity, barking and lunging, not from aggression but from a desperate need to keep the threat at a distance. True politeness in the canine world is often the act of ignoring one another, a subtle sign of mutual respect that we frequently override in our quest for play. The communication gap reaches its peak with the infamous guilty look. We return home to find a chewed shoe, and as we point a finger and raise our voice, the dog lowers its head, slinks away, and averts its gaze. Our anthropomorphism leads us to believe the dog feels remorse for its crime. However, ethological studies have proven that this expression is purely a reaction to the owner's current body language and tone of voice. The dog isn't reflecting on the past. They are responding to the immediate threat of a frustrated guardian. Because dogs exist primarily in the present moment, they cannot connect an event that happened 2 hours ago with a scolding happening now. To them, the punishment feels random and terrifying, eroding the very foundation of trust. They aren't saying, "I'm sorry I ate the shoe." They are saying, "I'm terrified because you are acting scary, and I'm trying to pacify you." This misunderstanding of basic canine emotion is perhaps the most heartbreaking gap in our long history. As we conclude this journey into the canine mind, the path forward becomes clear. We must move away from the owner mindset and toward the role of a guardian. This shift requires us to learn the calming signals, including the subtle lip licks, the soft blinks, and the intentional lookaways that dogs use to tell us they are overwhelmed. The ultimate act of love isn't projecting our human needs for hugs and scents onto them. It is creating an environment where they feel safe and understood. I challenge you to spend tomorrow just observing. Don't lead, don't demand, and don't humanize. Simply watch your partner. When you stop trying to change them into a furry version of yourself, you will discover the complex creature that has stood by your side for 15,000 years. Building a language of respect is letting dogs be dogs,